Great, I will call the meeting to order. It's Thursday, April 11th. This is the Woodbridge Economic Development Commission. First item on the agenda is a vote on the minutes for March. Then I'll give a quick chair update, a couple of items, recover some of the business sector and assessment review that we had discussed last time. Then we're the bulk of the meeting tonight, Dale is with us again, as always, and we'll cover we're gonna talk about business attraction tonight. I'll get into a little bit of the rationale for that as part of the setup, right? As we think about what is the plan for growing the business district in Woodbridge. Then we're gonna talk a little bit about the Woodbridge Business Community Outreach, which we started to talk about last time. Steve actually had a nice first interaction with a local business owner and has some feedback, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to share his approach and format and just get some initial learning, and I think be a lot to grow from there. We'll cover some old business, including an update on the BAR grant, which Dale will be able to speak to that for a little bit. Any new business that we might have that we want to discuss, and then we'll talk about the next meeting. All right. So first order is a vote on the March minutes, which I know Tony distributed after the last meeting.
I move we approve.
All right, we have a motion. Second. All in favor? Okay. All right, so the March minutes are approved. As far as chair updates, so a couple of things. Back, I believe it was right around the 23rd or so of March, Scott and I had a chance to go to the last 2030 ad hoc 2030 committee meeting. It was a really good conversation. The bulk of the meeting was really around the infrastructure development. I think we had talked last time that we were pursuing a LOTSIP grant in order to begin to build out some of the recommended improvements to the business district. So the bulk of the meeting was around that. Group called SLR, who was really heading up the design of that effort, spoke. And they laid out some drawings showing proposed the improvements to Amity Road, Bradley Road, and Lucy Street. Okay, so really what we're talking about are sidewalks, bike paths, new intersections, a traffic light, which ironically costs $750,000 for one traffic light. That was one of my big takeaways. Like, it's going to be an expensive traffic light at the intersection of Amity and Bradley Road. So that all was shared and is moving forward. Really, next steps on that, they're going for approval by the Board of Selectmen in June, July of this year. And if everything plays through, obviously there's a grant that needs to be secured. Timeline-wise, you'd be looking at construction that would start in the fall of 2025 and would target completion towards the end of 2026, just to give you a sense of timing. So roughly 2.5 years from today, just on the build-out of the infrastructure component of this. So there's a little ways to go there. Scott, did you have any other highlights that you wanted to add?
No.
Thought it was a really good discussion, and we came out of there really thinking the role of the EDC, right, as we go forward with the 2030 vision and the placemaking visions. There's really two components to this. There's the infrastructure, which they had talked about, and then there is the placemaking, which is what will the building design look like? What sort of tenants and businesses will we attract to to the downtown business district? That's really more of where I think EDC is going to come in. So in the near future, really kind of beginning to work more closely with them in bringing those plans to life. All right.
Are you looking for volunteers to participate?
We will when we get that sorted out. I think we're gonna have a little more interaction with 2030 before we make decisions on how do we kind of bring these two groups together. But that would be the plan going forward.
Okay.
All right. The other component or thing that I wanted to bring up this evening was, the town planner. So there's a request for proposal that's out for a town planner, which will have big interaction with the EDC. We've received we have a couple of candidates that Dale and I will be involved in interviewing a little bit later this month. Really to that role, to really head up kind of leading the vision and strategic development of a plan for the town to build out the business district. So obviously the EDC is going to be very closely involved in that. So I would imagine by May, definitely by June, we'll have an update there. Okay. One other item, I actually had it under old business, but we probably could speak to the bar grant. Dale, I know you had a,
Yeah, it's not a big update, but I was at a brownfield event in the Newtown with Benu, who is in charge of the program, and all of her staff to make the decisions on the program. So she told me that the announcement will be somewhere to early to mid-May, which is a surprise to me. She also announced, just FYI, a new round of funding that will be announced in July for assessments and remediation, not bar grants. Because bars usually only offered in the early part of the year. I think they should do it more often, because I think that's it. So it usually goes from bar to assessment to remediation, sort of a sequence of grants you would apply for. But she told me that, so I said, oh yeah, I just wanted to know, because, I want to report back to Woodbridge. And she goes, I know. So she doesn't like, they don't like when you push too hard on that thing. But I wanted to remind her, because I do a lot of volunteer work for them, when they ask us to speak at an event, or any of that stuff, for this very reason. So I emailed Mika knows, I emailed, to just say, this is the time to get your state senator and state rep to start making calls. What you asked for is, you didn't ask for the max, we talked about that. And this is like just about, outside of what big intersection stuff, this is a potential catalytic project that is important to the town. So announcements will be coming, I don't know when, it's sort of up to the governor. And it's always on a Friday, they announce, because if anybody didn't get funded, they can't call anybody, so. Yeah.
Dale, if the announcements are coming out in May potentially, is it a practice sometimes that they'll reach out to us for further clarifications or to get a sense of some of the questions they may want either clarified or a chance to make that contact? And if so, have we set up somebody to sort of, I think Tony's probably our,
Right. The answer
point of
is-
contact, but should we
right.
have somebody on our EDC?
Very
be there?
often they do that,
Yep.
usually more with assessment or remediation grants, because that's more in production and they want to make sure they're not committing remediation money to a project that really
Right.
hasn't been thoroughly assessed, but they would have asked already, is my thought on the whole thing.
Given that timing, okay.
Yeah, you would have known already if they had any questions. They still may, but it's already, my goodness, it's almost mid-April already. So it could be as, within 30 days, so normally they do, but for bar grants, not as often.
okay. Right. And if you recall, the bar grant is designed to help fund the consultant that's going to work with the town on options for.
There'll be several vendors, my guess, is involved in it, because you're gonna have to procure a licensed environmental professional to do the phase one, maybe to update some of the costs that were done in the past. You probably have to get some sort of person, and it could end up being the planning consultant that you mentioned earlier. They could help with some of this stuff. I mean, that should be the kind of thing to maybe offset some of the cost to them through the grant. Not a lot of money. Remember, if you recall, you can only put in like 5% for admin or monitoring or managing it. And so it may end up they could do that because you're going to have to do cost benefit, and look at the possibilities.
So in that regard,
Yeah.
the bar application sort of is going to be the first time for Woodbridge to get some data, like you say, a cost-benefit analysis we've sort of seen that play out amongst the participation of the community, but there's going to be community participation, but in addition, there's going to be some data that's going to be in front of the community for like cost benefits, traffic, infrastructure, those kinds of things.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah,
and you want
which
to
we
keep
don't
them,
have-
you
we
want
haven't
them to
had,
be
right,
involved.
yeah.
You definitely want them to be involved, because I know there's been several attempts at the country club, and, you know, you want to measure twice and cut once there, as they say in carpentry. And by having them, and having a steering committee, and even the people could be less interested in developing, you know, get them in front of you and involved, so they're part of the solution. They're not just problem finders, problem solvers. And it could be many different things. It doesn't have to be one thing. I think we made that case in the grant itself.
Just have one more question. It may not be the time to talk about this, in which case we can set it aside. But Dale, you had mentioned first time that we met about the Brownfields Investigation Group out of Yukon.
Yes.
And I think about the 2030 development and the environmental remediation issues that you're talking about. Does it make sense for us to get the Yukon folks involved at this point in time? You said it was going to take a year, but I'm thinking about all those property owners down in that district who have dirty properties that would like to get them remediated, maybe need help understanding the scope of what's involved.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, actually. They were there at this event on the 5th with Binu and Marisa, her name is. It's a
Yeah.
long last name I could not pronounce.
Should we be kind of separate some time to talk
So
about
is
that
that,
specifically?
so what you're
I
saying?
can talk about it now. I mean, it's an important thing, because a lot of these, it's like anything else. You develop a relationship with them, maybe you have them do an inventory. All their services are free. That's the other good thing. So in some towns, they come in and they'll just do an inventory, and you'll say, well, we don't have that many brownfields. You have more than you know.
Yeah.
You know,
We have
so-
a number of establishments on hand.
Yeah, so they would come in, and what I've used them for is to do these inventories, because the state, because of the retirements and all the attrition at the state level, at DEEP, the state records are not up to snuff. So what they do is they go in and they create all of the updates on all the properties. So if it's a Transfer Act site, as Scott is suggesting, establishments, there's forms that have to be filed, and it's not always clear on the state record if somebody looks it up to develop it, that's the most up-to-date thing. So I think engaging them, what you want to do, and I can set up an intro call with Marisa, and they're fantastic. To get the quality of service that you get for free is worth it, and since 2030 is doing their thing, I think, now, you have to get within their schedule, because they're on a semester basis with students, so they may not be able to do the inventory in the fall semester, they may be only do it in the spring semester. I don't know exactly when they do it. And then the next thing would be that if you wanted to do remediation at the country club, just saying, or anywhere else, they actually help write the grants through the federal EPA with the students. That's part of their practicum.
Okay.
And they do a great job. They have a very high success rate. And they do, I don't know if they do DECD grants, but they definitely are worth engaging earlier than later, to your point.
So what would be the next step for us?
I'll do an intro with, with Scott and Mika, and
Okay.
you could talk about 2030, maybe just sort of create a little piece to distribute to them, and tell them about 2030 in the area, have a map, and just, show them, because they understand GIS, and they understand a lot of things. This is one of the best things going in the state. for
Yeah.
Brunswick.
So the bar grant, though, my understanding is specific to the country club
Correct.
consultant.
Yeah, but you could, in theory, let's say there's 3 different things you want to do with it later as a result of this, and by and large, the buy-in to do it. You might go to Yukon to actually write the grant, because there's going to be some remediation on that property.
Mhm.
When you look at remediation, it's always in the aggregate. So you might have a very limited area for remediation. From what I read about the country club, there's pockets, but the rest of it is not dirty, outside of probably pesticides, from taking care of the grass. But when the state looks at it, they look at it in the aggregate. So if the cost of something is expensive because it's really dirty in one spot, the whole property is deemed to be moderately contaminated.
Mhm.
You say, well, it's only that little spot. So that's the kind of thing that a Yukon or somebody would really help you. So, but yes, it's only
guess what comes to mind is we're reaching the end of the semester. And it makes sense to make that contact now, perhaps
Yeah.
to tee it up for
Yeah,
sometime in the fall.
good idea.
So then engaging UConn more around the business district.
So let's see what she has to say,
Okay.
because I don't know the sequence, and they've had changes in a positive way,
Mhm.
brought in new staff, they have an LEP now on staff for, excuse me,
What-
for the
what's an
UConn
LEP?
program. Huh?
What's an LEP?
Licensed environmental professional. So, a quick primer on that. So the state of Connecticut, because of the lack of people, and the state is really good to work with. I don't care what anybody says, because I do projects, and they're actually, as long as you understand they have a job to do. But so Connecticut legislature created the LEP concept, and there's, all throughout New England, they have these. They may be called different things. They essentially become the state. So when it comes to verifying that the work was done, the remediation was done, they might do the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, the remedial action plan, they implement it, they watch the construction remediation, they verify that the work was done. In a sense, they are the state. So the state just checks the boxes to make sure, they double check their work. The state never has to get involved in many cases because of the LEP structure in the state of Connecticut. That has saved an incredible amount of time. Now, if they fool around with it and don't do it properly, they lose their license, so they're all.
Do they take it right to the end to like a no further action kind of concept?
Yeah,
Or-
I mean,
or-
the state has to
or-
verify,
or-
the state has to double
for that
check
to
their.
wanna come forward?
Yeah, they do, but the state, obviously they're gonna double check.
Yeah.
And also LEPs will do the hazardous building stuff without anybody's approval. In other words, the LEP is very usually, you think about dirty dirt, groundwater, things like that. The LEP's job is to, because they're establishments, and it gets into the whole Transfer Act thing, but if you have a building that has asbestos and lead and, above or below ground oil tank that ruptured or something like that, the actual physical part of the building is actually under nobody's purview except the LEP, except if you're in like a school and you have the Department of Health or, something like that. So the LEP has great latitude, and this guy Wayne is an LEP, works with UConn. He's on their staff now, so he helps advise the students as well. These are mostly older, a lot of these are older students. These aren't like, Gen Z. There's a new one I saw today that's younger than Gen Z.
I've heard Polar.
Huh?
Polar, Polar is
Is that what they call them?
for the next generation.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
that's my granddaughter probably.
Yeah.
All right, so I went off on a tangent, but it's all related. I was with the mayor of West Haven, and we were talking about phase 1s, phase 2s, and phase 3s, and I said, not for nothing, I don't want to insult your intelligence, but do you really know the difference between 1, 2, and 3? Because it's important to understand the difference. And she said, to her credit, not really. I mean, she knew sort of, but didn't really have the distinction of the 3 site assessments.
And on that, Mika, I know we're still reviewing the different consultants, right? For the,
We are. We're down to 2 at this point in time,
Okay.
and I'll be notifying those coming back for additional discussion.
okay,
And next step will be for the 2, for the Board of Selectmen to review the 2 and make a selection on the single one that we're going to use.
great. So that's kind of running in conjunction with the grant.
Correct,
Yeah. Awesome.
correct.
Okay. All right, so moving forward, the next item on the agenda was just business sector and assessment reviews. This is sort of a pickup on the last conversation that we had. Did a little background work with the Woodbridge Tax Assessor's Office, and working with Tony Genovese too, to kind of just identify what are the actual contributions of the commercial business within the town of Woodbridge. So on the handout that I pulled together, if you recall, I pulled just several businesses, local, to give us all a framework for what is the actual tax contribution from some of these businesses, and then made that comparison to, relative to the overall town budget. So, not getting into all of the details on on all of these, you can see what the kind of revised number is the combined commercial and business, when you look at real estate and the personal property tax, right, all in contributes about $5 million of a $50 million budget, right? So put another way, 10% of the tax revenue in Woodbridge is contributed by commercial and industrial, right? And 90% contributed by residential.
Residential.
Right,
I see.
so I think we had a little different mix last time when we
Right.
looked at it, and there were some tweaks that we had to make to the numbers. So what is really the takeaway from that as we think about our efforts? And this is really kind of to set up what we want to speak through with Dale on business attraction. You know, we have a lot of work to do. It's, you know, each one of these businesses is not a huge contributor, right? But in order to start to bend the curve, right? Because we had in our conversation the other day, like we've actually gone backwards in Woodbridge on the grand list in the past year. So we really looked at it and said, business retention, yes, absolutely, but there's a very small business base to retain, right? And the bigger opportunity would be to start to fill out, you know, some of the vacancies and some of the short-term opportunities in the business district, right? So that's really what we're going to talk about tonight. Kind of the bulk of the meeting will really be around the business attraction piece of this. So Dale laid out a nice one-pager for us that he's going to take us through. So Dale, turn it over to you.
Sure. By the way, were the healthcare facilities part of that commercial industrial, or is that separate?
Yes, they were.
They were part of it,
Mm-hmm.
but there are two large, at least two large ones, right?
Yes, those are included.
Right, so I thought they would be separate.
No, those are included in the big number. Yeah.
All right, so like we went through the retention, I had a list, so I just created a list, this is from a slide presentation I did for you early on, you know, I think the first night I was here. And so I create this list as sort of a talking point. And first thing to point out is you have no staff, at least right now. And so all of these things are nice ideas, and it gets back to what this commission and the volunteers do versus this new planning consultant that's gonna be coming in, who should be able to help with a lot of these things. So it's sort of, there's some similar things. This is not in any like hierarchy, like, you know, there's not like, the number one is not the most important thing. It's actually pretty important, but, so understand the psychology of business attraction. So there's different ways to address business attraction, and some of it is educating this commission, which, and I'll mention that as we go along. Some of that is understanding the market that you are trying to connect with. That is comprised of site selectors and your real estate brokers, who are really your best friends, the commercial real estate brokers. Because site selectors, people get excited about site selectors. I used to talk to Matt, your friend Matt, about site selectors. And I'm not a big fan of going too crazy with site selectors. A site selector is somebody who's national. Okay, they're in Detroit and they're working with a company with a 300,000 square foot former auto plant, and they want to downsize and move to a new location that's energy efficient. Well, are they going to find that in Woodbridge or most towns in this region? Chances are they're not. What they do is they go through everybody's website without you even knowing it. And they go and and they've told us, we used to bring them in and take them on helicopter tours when I think Orange had a couple big pieces of property, and and wine and dine them, take them to the tennis tournament in New Haven. I remember going, like, I really like going to this, sitting in the corporate box, but it's really kind of a waste of money in a way. They'll be the first to tell you, their job is to eliminate sites, not to pick sites. They basically use their staff to go through every site in a region that they might be interested in, and then they say, okay, Woodbridge doesn't have anything more than 5 acres to offer, they're out. Let's move on to the next town. They eliminate sites, and whatever's left, they go forward with it. And even those decisions are based on, let's say, the CEO's spouse. Okay, remember GE, moving out in Connecticut? A lot of it had to do with the gentleman's wife. And this happens. Or they want to go back to their roots. So site selectors is one audience. If you have something to offer, would the country club be of interest to a big residential? Maybe you'd get something like you have at Toll Brothers. I don't know. We don't know yet until you do the cost benefit analysis. But your local brokers are really where it's at. This is where you want to engage people. All the people that do commercial real estate, or some people do a mix now. Because of COVID and the impact on the commercial marketplace, office marketplace, has gone down in need. A lot of brokers are hybrid now. They do both. But you definitely want to engage them. So that could mean to bring them here to a meeting, have them talk about the marketplace, educate you about what they're seeing out there.
Mhm.
They know what's out there. Or you have a coffee and bagel thing. You go to the Katz Brothers, have them provide the bagels and whatever, and have like a breakfast meeting with them. Find out what's going on, because they're the ones that have the real insight. So where your trailers are on 63, you may have your own ideas. We'd like to see this. I had many residents say, I'd like to see this. Well, that's nice, but is that what the market is? So they'll tell you, and they'll tell you what is good, what is bad. They might even comment on your zoning regulations. So understanding your marketplace is sort of the first thing. As part of being prepared, that number one is probably the most important thing to just getting started, having a really good inventory, not just of the brownfields, but of all the sites. And I bet you the list isn't that long. I mean, it's probably 10 or 20 properties that are more than a quarter acre or something like that. You kind of have to be realistic. So having a good inventory is really important to business attraction, because that's what people are, they quickly want to see what you have. They may not ever talk to anybody here, they might just go to your website. Advanced CT Advanced CT is the regional organization for they're really statewide, but they have regions. They used to be CERC, the Connecticut Economic Resource Center. But Advanced CT is located in New Haven. You can go on their website. They have SiteFinder, which is a service. You can also, and you can just simply connect from the town's website to SiteFinder, and that tells you everything available in Woodbridge of any size, leasing and selling. But SiteFinder is not infallible. There's LoopNet, there's all these things, but use your brokers to really find the best bang for the buck. The problem with websites is you have to really keep them fresh and updated, and so if you want to, I've tried to list properties that are available on my website, and it's laborious, because it's a dynamic thing that's going on, and if it's out of date, it's not good. So having really the right approach to making properties available, talk to your brokers. They're the ones that are going to tell you how to.
Dale, when you say listing properties on your website,
Meaning the town's website.
on the town's, okay.
I used to have a link, available, and if I look at the Hamden Economic Development page now, which I occasionally look at, they're doing it. But they have to constantly update it, and then they have to pay somebody to do it, Some of it's a content management system, but some of it is like architecture on a website. You have to write pictures and all of that. So having that inventory is good. I'm going to jump around. Number 3, available demographics, updating them frequently. In some of the grant workshops I do, I talk about data and demographics, and you have to, again, have that available for somebody who calls. I think the planning consultant will definitely be able to pull that together as part of their scope, so that's a good thing.
Also, in the scope of the planner was keeping that inventory.
Right.
And kind of comprising a master list, and that's where everybody's head goes. Like, where do we go find this list of, I even think vacancies, right? Not even just undeveloped
And not just the
properties.
inventory, but the GIS that's behind it.
Right.
The geographic information, topography, utilities, easements to the greatest extent possible. Some of that already exists, it already lives on your website, but they will make it presentable, help you make it presentable to the developer, because they're gonna say, okay, they have 3 parcels over 5 acres, that's nice, where are they? Okay, they're on a map, but they don't know, the topo is important for them to know, and they wanna see what's adjacent to it. So having that information, because time is money, people move fast, faster than meeting once a month. They definitely move fast, like in hours. They'll move on from Woodbridge if they don't find what they have. So when the town picks a planning consultant, we can work out, frequency of updates and things like that. So just data is important, data is king. Just,
So is
your
it-
mind going.
Yeah, I was just, I sort of wondering, is that the type of thing that the town planner that we're considering would
Yes,
be part of their responsibilities?
yeah,
I see.
and,
Okay.
or setting up, and they're not gonna be there forever either, so, so they, want it, so it's sustainable in the future. A lot of towns like Woodbridge, there's many towns in the region, North Branford, Bethany, they're not gonna ever really have, 3 full-time people doing stuff like that. You can't afford it, and you don't really need it. So you definitely want them to build something that will last for you, not just an Excel spreadsheet. You want it to link to something. I did a sort of boutique project for this housing group. It was the various mutual housing groups across Connecticut. They wanted to do an inventory in like 15 towns, and I had to create this GIS system. I didn't even know what I was doing in the beginning. I figured it out, but they were able to click on something and the topo would pop up, with adjacent properties, the zoning, what the zoning was. And they wanted, because they wanted to quickly evaluate sites for housing, affordable housing in their case. It was actually an interesting experience, because there was no playbook for this, so we just had to do it. Okay, the infrastructure capacity, you talked about the light. I'm sure part of it's not just the light, you probably have turning radiuses, easements to acquire, all those things become part of understanding the infrastructure in the town. But for business attraction, of course, having traffic data is important. It would be great to have it, because they're gonna be doing that, I would assume, as part of the light, is probably a traffic study at that intersection, because the DOT's not gonna improve, that's a state road, right, 63?
It is.
Right, so they're not gonna approve anything without a traffic study.
It's been done and it's been qualified.
Right,
Mhm.
so that information, is important to developers. They wanna see how many cars a day go by there now, and, and they could probably take the light and, project out what it's gonna be. But also, as part of you probably have a capital plan, for the town.
We do.
You have water and sewer to a certain extent in the town. But making sure there's a plan for it that you can share with developers or business owners. Sometimes it's a business owner, sometimes it's a developer, it just depends. Capacity wise, you're improving a sewer line. Do you have a manhole that it connects to that you're able to do future growth? So when Quinnipiac was really developing, like property all over the place in Hamden, there was a road, it's a long story, but a road that comes off of the York campus, and they were widening the sewer line to dump into Whitney Avenue. And I was part of a team managing the process. I said, well, how does that connect to the manhole, the repository of everything, in the main road, Whitney Avenue, which is a state road? And it was undersized. It turned out it was undersized. Because if you wanted to continue that sewer to the north, you would have to dig everything up again later on. It's very expensive. So, we got Quinnipiac to kick in, and basically they doubled the size of the manhole. Sounds like a boring thing, but it's really
Essential.
important for future growth, especially as you go up 63 or 69.
There's a housing project that came across from that then?
Pardon me?
Was there a housing project that came across from?
It
that
came from, it
access
was
way
the
from-
York, it
All
was
those
the York.
sidewalks went up there, and then that housing project was built on.
Well, that was small potatoes compared to it was the York Hill campus,
Right, but it.
which you went right by that housing project.
Yeah,
Yeah, but the purpose of that sewer widening was for the York Hill, and that housing project might not have been approved
without that
if
widening.
not for that. So you have to plan for, because what costs $10 today, very shortly will cost $15. Inflation is not going away in the construction industry at all. The other one I like to bring up now is IT. Making sure that you have, for business attraction, making sure that there's a plan to make sure there's fiber or at least fast internet, as fast as you can get. And, it's the usual suspects, because I think GoNet Speed, which is in some towns, I doubt that's in Woodbridge. You don't have that here, do you?
It is not.
You got Comcast and Frontier.
Comcast, Cablevision, or Optimum and Frontier.
So, having a plan for IT, because, you know, you might have a STEM-related business, you have some STEM in bio-related businesses, health sciences, that have to download massive documents or send massive information. If you don't have any kind of good internet, it's definitely not going to encourage business attraction. And you have the ability, when I first met you, Miko, we discovered there was a grand opening of and you
Yep.
went there, right?
Yes.
You didn't realize, you didn't know what they did probably, and you learned when you got there, right?
Biolab. Mhm.
Right, so Biolab is,
Pure.
they're constantly sending information to their partners, and so it's a very important thing. And I'm gonna talk, the one I added was business creation, I know that was a separate thing. So because of COVID now, one of the consequences, unintended consequences, were that people started starting businesses out of their homes because of COVID. And so, to the extent that you can get internet speed in the residential areas, not every single area, obviously, Woodbridge, but think broader, because I don't think that's going away anytime soon. People want to run businesses out of their homes, and that's not a bad thing. Okay, so that's what I mean by infrastructure, really thinking about it, not just doing the usual things that all towns do. They have the public works department submit a budget, and then the community council, I'm not gonna say it's Woodbridge or any other particular town, everybody does pretty much the same thing. And they say, oh, we can't afford those sidewalks this year, or we don't wanna bond another $40 million for, infrastructure. But I'm talking about planning for business attraction.
So I think, Dale, there's the proactive and the reactive on that.
Exactly.
Right? So, we can go through all of this, but if there's an opportunity that presents itself and, hey, we need to invest in infrastructure, or do we do like we're doing with 2030, we're investing in the infrastructure in order to attract it?
Well,
Right.
this is why the last bullet is 2030, because
Right.
2030 is gonna be your ability to collaborate with them and join them on many things, or completely join them, is gonna be the thing that helps you plan better. It's a pretty picture right now. The traffic light is not a pretty picture, you know how much that's gonna cost. So imagine scaling that up to where you wanna be. So let's keep going, because there's a bunch of things, it all ties together. Some of this is having people come to you and really talk to you as a commission. I always try to, when I used to plan every meeting, like every other meeting, at least I have a speaker, on something, whether it's business retention, business attraction, because if you're educated, it might pique your interest in something, and then it's all good, all for the good, versus just getting reports, this is happening, that's happening. Okay, shifting gears a little bit, a cluster presence. So, just to go back to the famous professor from Harvard who developed the cluster concept, it was to, I know I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again in terms of attraction. And you're in a good position in a way because you're so close to Yale, you're literally down the street from New Haven. There's a lot of connections, and some towns have been successful at growing certain clusters of industries, of businesses that employ people. The big one that stands out for me is healthcare. We talked about this earlier today. You have two big places that employ a lot of people. How do you encourage growth in the healthcare industry? What strategy do you use? How do you know what you need to do? Bring them in and talk to them. How can we help you? Because what happens in healthcare, in the healthcare marketplaces, they like to group things together geographically. So if you're going to the doctor's office, not just the assisted living type healthcare, but because of I know there's a lot of consolidation in the healthcare system between Yale and Hartford and New Vance up in the Danbury area. You go to the doctor, you need to get your blood drawn, they want it down the street. They don't want you to go all the way down to Yale or something, or Quest or something like that. Or you need an MRI. Well, that MRI machine at 46 Mills is going to bring in some taxes for the town. So you work with your healthcare folks to see how you can attract doctors groups, talk to Yale, talk to the hospital. Almost everything's owned by a hospital system. There's not too many independent medical places anymore. The urgent care places are mostly owned by the hospitals. They started off as independent. But every one of those places have machines in them that you can tax. This is a cluster approach. So the cluster approach in one town is different than the other. I don't know if you have enough manufacturing to have a manufacturing cluster, but if you do, bring some manufacturers to this meeting. Have them talk to you about what they go through.
How do you determine if you have enough?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think what you want to do is find some key people. Now, I asked you if you knew Jamie Scott,
I do.
right? Jamie Scott has an air handling business over by my old pediatrician.
Former EDC member.
Okay, so bring him in. I think his business is still there.
It is.
Near Sydney
It is.
Spiegel. My
And
cousin.
he'd certainly be open to coming in and
Yeah,
speaking
have
to
him come
us.
and talk about the marketplace. You might learn that you have more in terms of manufacturing than you realize. And when you have a manufacturer, my goodness, they have lots of equipment that you tax. They also have lots, they need employees, which leads to conversation on workforce. This list is just, I bounce around a little bit because it's all related. If you bring in Jamie, he's gonna tell you that there are 15,000 opening manufacturing jobs in Connecticut. They cannot find the people to run CNC machines and all the machines and stuff that they use. They're trying everything. They finally realized that they have to pay people in their training, like paid internships almost, because people are working. People are not participating in these workforce programs because they're mostly people that are already working, they have to support their families. So now that's changing. But bring him in and have him come in. He's very knowledgeable about, he's been involved with publishing a couple like booklets on, what's made in Connecticut. He's very knowledgeable, and he would come here. So you'll learn. Maybe you don't have a cluster, but maybe he'll tell you something you can do. And the other thing that happens when you talk to, if you're going on the retention side, you go to their shop and you visit them and see, make them happy by going there and saying hi and seeing what they do. They love showing you their stuff. I mean, they're very proud of it. But when you're doing the attraction side, you want to learn from somebody like Jamie. Who is this supply chain? Who does he, have mills as, little parts for his machines? Who does he buy stuff? What's the trucking company that he uses to transport stuff? These are things you want to find out to see if you can do a little matchmaking, or if you see the wholesale. We have a really big need for trucking. I don't know, what it is. When I did some work with Leuzzi Cheese in Hamden, I was astounded by the impact of all the supply chain relationships, from scientists who for the health department to look at the cheese, to the distribution system, to freezing, the trucks, the people that maintain the trucks, that take the cheese somewhere. I was amazed at all the impacts all over the town. And so if he says there's a real big need for X, then that's obviously something you want to think about for attraction. Talk to the business people, try to think like them. That's how you'll be successful on the attraction side. You're not going to probably attract, outside of something like the country club or something like that, maybe a couple boutique places, you're not going to attract a massive, that Detroit business with 300 employees. You don't have a 100,000 square foot building in town. So think about what you are and try to attract businesses for that. So bringing Jamie in looking at the cluster is the way to do it. Bringing in one of your healthcare people, maybe I'm sure there's a couple doctors in Woodbridge that you could, being a little facetious, could invite to the meeting to see where they think it's coming from. Anyway.
In our town, we may be hampered a little bit by trucking or transportation, the ability to get to the sort of the I-95s and the
Right,
ones of the world.
plus that
We
intersection
got a hole
is
in the
terrible.
wall. We got a hole in the wall, and it's, I remember finding that moving my son, the truck he rented was too big. We ended up taking an
Well,
extra.
somebody-
We ended up taking an extra day to go around the.
Where you're gonna-
But I think the scale of what you're gonna find, you're gonna find it, the transportation system will work, I don't know if there's a market to go towards Waterbury on, 63 to 8, up that way. you'll find out things you don't know. I certainly don't know, but, talk to the businesses. That's the best way to find out where the market is.
So with the example of assisted living, right, which you could say, all right, attract more assisted living to Woodbridge, or attract the businesses that
That feed the,
that feed
that
the
support
assisted-
them,
This,
that support them.
and we haven't
because-
really done that
Yeah,
yet. even
because
though we-
as, you know, long story, but, short is that elder care and healthcare is constantly evolving. Now it's all memory care. There used to be nursing homes, now it's memory care. I heard the governor speak a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about several large nursing homes closing. Certain healthcare places are giving up their Medicaid beds.
Did he indicate why?
Partially,
Labor? I mean,
pardon me?
Workforce?
Partially workforce.
Mhm.
Where my mom is, they went from, I think 59 beds to 29 beds, partially because of workforce, but partially because they went more going in the direction of memory care. Because people are living so long now that, you know, this has become marketplace. So, you know, there's a lot of different spin-offs. When you get into the assisted living cluster, because the whole thing is about clusters, you might find that small offices might be needed to support, you know, mental health things for, mental health services for seniors that they don't provide on campus. Talk to them, find out where they're going. That's when you're gonna find out what you're trying to attract. Simple. Think like a business. All right, so you have a couple clusters, healthcare would be one. I would try manufacturing. I don't know if you have enough for, retail clusters are tough, or small business clusters are tough. If it's retail, like, you know, like a name brand, to me, it's not worth putting a lot of time into it, because they're regional people, they don't care about Woodbridge so much, they care about their people showing up on time to work. But if you wanna put together a small business group, but this is like a 20-30 thing maybe to work with on, we'll come back to that. I'm trying to, like, you know, economize your time here. Range of housing opportunities, types and costs. Well, this is something that people don't always wanna talk about. But if you're trying to attract businesses to your town, usually workforce is one of the biggest things that comes up in every conversation, attracting or growing or even attracting more of something. And what's the biggest issue for workforce? Housing. Can their employees afford to live here? Now, you're close to New Haven, and but on the other end, they're not gonna probably live in Bethany, because it's not rental housing in Bethany that I know of. They're not gonna wanna go too far, but to Naugatuck toward that area. You got New Haven on one side. There has to be at least some consideration of where the town is going housing-wise. Now, most housing development for workers in a lot of these industries, could be biotech, could be healthcare, they're one bedrooms and efficiencies. You know, most developments now are not two bedrooms, and I know there's a sensitivity to the school system and all that. But you have to at least address the issue of housing in some way. Sometimes that's done through the town planner, sometimes that's done in the POCD, but there has to be some attempt, if you have a good business attraction strategy, at least be knowledgeable about the opportunities for housing, and be, you know, my opinion is, doesn't matter because I don't live here, but I'm saying that you have to be a little flexible, thinking about that as a real thing. Now, what's affordable? You know, affordable is not necessarily low. You know, a family of four, the median family income in Woodbridge, I don't know what it is.
160.
60?
160.
160 is the
Yes.
median family income? in
Family
Woodbridge?
income, correct.
So,
160.
wow, that's, you know, so the point is that it's higher than you think. 80% of median then is 80% of 160.
Oh, yeah, but it would be statewide for affordable.
Yeah.
It
Well,
would be the statewide, it wouldn't be Woodbridge's, it would be for affordable housing. I
it would be in the,
believe.
it'll be a
You can check me
regional,
on it, but
it'll be a regional.
It's a regional?
Yeah, if you're using HUD,
thought it was
it's gonna be
state.
It would be state.
I think it's safe.
It would be state for.
But it's higher than people think, the general public,
Right.
it's higher, so I'll use Hamden because I know Hamden, the family of four, median, 80% of median was like 58,000, not low. So any program would have to be at least that or lower. So the point is to do some thinking about that and try to find some common ground on housing, because attraction is somewhat dependent on that. Yes?
How about transportation as
Transportation.
an alternative to
More housing?
Yeah.
Definitely, if you can get Connecticut Transit to do what you wanna do.
Yeah.
because that's not.
The reason I say this
that's
is
so-
because I just think it's hard for a developer to come in and to, you know, put in attractive homes, first in Woodbridge.
Well, not talking about homes necessarily, this is a little,
We're
maybe a
just
little.
talking about housing.
We're talking about apartments.
Well, I think it depends on the business.
Right, depends on the, so I have to use Hamden because it's the one I know best. So all this housing in downtown New Haven, apartment buildings, I don't know if you've been down there, I know you have, but
Sure.
it's unbelievable. You go to
Where's
Worcester,
the
go to get
housing?
pizza on Worcester Street and
There's a Texas
massive-
Donut there now.
and they fill up, bam, like that. So, so the Tagliatella family is a family from North Haven, that they built housing all over, lots of rental housing, there are a lot of mixed avenues, them. Anyway, they proposed a site on 7 buildings, 300 units on, I'm not saying they're doing that here, so everybody calm down, but it's good to be the consultant, because you can pretty much
Say
say
whatever you
anything.
want.
So they were like, okay, they wanted to build all these units, and everybody's like, who would wanna live there in a $2,000 for a 1-bedroom apartment, or for an efficiency, $1,600 or whatever. And I said, well, first of all, not everybody wants to live downtown. And you can get to Yale in 10 minutes tops, even in, you know.
3 miles to the center from, it's 3
Yeah.
miles, 10 minutes, maybe,
Yeah.
it's 3 miles.
Right. They filled those buildings instantaneously, and the town of Hamden receives $2.5 million of tax revenue. Remember the whole thing about value versus revenue? They got a huge, so again, using the model of millions compared to your grand list for a mill of taxation, I would say 3/4 of a mill of taxation was reduced because of that project. And it serves a need. These are all higher income folks. They're the workforce. Quinnipiac opened the medical school on the Blue Cross campus. The medical students that go there live at the tax place. So look at housing from the perspective of workforce. Those people have almost 0 kids in those apartments. There's a few babies, yes, but they're not gonna live forever in a 1-bedroom. But they filled up 7 buildings almost immediately, and they got a lot of tax relief. So having at least, even if you have a relationship with somebody who's gonna build in New Haven close by, have it, now with the transportation, absolutely, but how many ways can you get Connecticut Transit to change the routes and add routes? It's not easy to do, it can be done. The last thing is, there's probably other services, that businesses want to know, if there's daycare around, for example, the Central Business District. To the extent, I don't know, you know, what the situation is here, but, you know, probably some of it's in New Haven. But daycare is part of the equation, that you could attract more daycare in close proximity to, let's say, the 2030 area, because that's gonna be a workforce issue. Bringing up issues that come up all the time in attraction. Okay, the workforce thing, having knowledge of it is nice, but having a collaboration is nicer. So Amity, in their career pathways kind of program, is working on something that meets the current economy, not just you send them to college and hope they do well with their $80,000 in debt and philosophy major, being a little cheeky there, but getting degrees in things that your business area is looking for. You know, so if you had a big manufacturing cluster, you know, activity going on, you might want to work with your public school system to make sure they amp up their STEM program or other programs that would lead people into manufacturing trades, because manufacturing is all about computers now. It's very little, you know, it's not like the old manufacturing you think about. Jamie will actually tell you a lot about that. And most people that go into manufacturing, even if they want to run a machine, end up going into engineering later because they get the bug, you know, from liking math or something like that. So building something with your public school system that keeps kids here after they graduate is really key. Southern Connecticut State University, where I went, the state university system has like an 83% retention rate in Connecticut. Don't you want your young people to stay, you know, stay here? You do. And that is, you know, that's retention, those are the taxpayers in 10 years from now. So being proactive, you talk about proactive versus reactive, being proactive with the workforce, and again, I can guide you on some of this, but having a relationship with the school system. In the case of, I told Mika about this, in the case of New Milford, Connecticut, where I do some consulting work outside of this Rex contract, I'm sort of like a utility baseball player.
You're everywhere.
Well, no, not everywhere. I'm in a few places.
Milford.
Well, they have me on retainer for whatever they want to work on. So in one case, they wanted to build their health sciences cluster. And so I work with the Nuvance system. That's the equivalent of Yale New Haven Hospital system up there. It's smaller though. But they wanted me to work with their public high school and work with Naugatuck Community College and work with the Waterbury Workforce Alliance. I forget what the name of it is. And they have a very dynamic system in Waterbury because of the history of manufacturing in Waterbury. And we put together a working group that is today working on programs and then, transportation. Up there it's a little bit more geographically isolated, so they have like a whole Uber program to get people to work and all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of things you can help create to put yourself on the map to attract. If people know you're doing this and you publicize it, working with your public school system to get more kids interested in engineering, or even just straight up manufacturing, that's going to attract some businesses.
The technical high school system in Connecticut is excellent.
Excellent.
I
I'm glad you said that because it is truly excellent.
I-
I'm going to email you all some panels that I did with businesses talking to parents. It was interesting to put together. I won't take your time with that.
There are something like 900 kids on the waiting list for Platt.
Really?
I heard that one day, but I do a lot of recruiting from the technical high schools, and
They come out qualified.
So this is
I'm
a
blown
cluster.
away. Yeah.
When I talked to the first
Yeah.
Paula and Bethany, and she said, we don't really have an economy here, it's a farming town. I said, well, you definitely have an economy.
Right.
You have agriculture and you have contracting. And to your point, some of these properties, like the one with the trailers on it, are, prominently located, but you could attract, the trades in properties like that, where people have trucks and equipment that you tax. Or maybe you want something better there, but there may be properties behind properties where you can attract plumbers and electricians, and that is, you're totally right. It's exploding, the whole trades area is exploding because everybody needs a plumber. Everybody needs, you don't pay
And-
anything. You
And
got a
the
problem.
shift in what they're doing with the junior colleges, right, and kind of being an onboard to the state school program is making that even more attractive. So they come out of the technical high schools and they go into, a lot of them end up going into like the junior college, the gateways of the world, and that's an on-ramp.
It's cheaper.
It's an on-ramp to finish at Southern.
So
and-
you take the next step and you get your high school
Yeah,
involved.
more
Right.
people are doing that.
That's
Right.
really the trick, is to
Right.
get your public school system
Yeah.
It's definitely
on some
definitely
aspect of one of these things. Okay,
keeping that.
all right, so
2 years ago.
zoning, and that, making sure that you talk to business people and your real estate brokers about what they think about your zoning. They may not want to tell you because they don't want to get everybody mad at them or something like that. I've heard that from brokers. I don't want to get somebody mad at me. But make sure your zoning is consistent with what your POCD says. And when you get the planning consultant on board, Mika, we should probably have a conversation about the POCD, what they think of it. 'Cause you have
It's
to
in the
have it.
scope.
Huh?
It's in the scope of work.
Right, so they're gonna tell you, you need to upgrade it, do this or that, and then your zoning regulations always follow your POCD, because the POCD is the vision, and the tool is the zoning regs. And so, you may think everything's cool, but when you talk to brokers who do business, they may say everything's great. But you wanna hear that, you wanna see, like sign regulations, I might have brought this up before, in your retail center. Sign regulations are notoriously old. COVID I don't know if I'm sorry if I'm repeating something from before. So you have a few shopping centers here, right? So if you want to track, even if it's not a big tax added, a retailer goes out and another retailer goes in, you know, maybe you get some new equipment or something for tax, but it's jobs and, you know, stuff for people to buy or services. So when you look at sign regulations, they're all from the 1980s, maybe the 1990s. And what happened during COVID and just around before COVID is a lot of retailers reduced their floor space. Amazon affected this a lot. So what happens in shopping centers is that sign regulations are based on the linear feet of all the stores, like let's say a U, or Stop and Shop. It still is, right? Like, there's a bunch of stores there, right? And the amount of signage, it sounds tedious, but if you're trying to attract, hey, you gotta look at these things. The amount of square feet of signage allowed in any shopping center is based on, most regulations will say based on the length of the stores, the measurement of the stores. Well, if they say, you know, based on that, you could get 5 stores in a shopping center, what happened was a lot of businesses reduced their footprint, you know, maybe by a third or a half. They don't need as much floor space. Supercuts probably has changed the way they did business, right?
Where it's headed.
Right, right. So the point is that the regulations are set up for 5 stores, but now you have 10 stores in that same shopping center.
Mhm.
And the last business in gets kind of the short end of the stick, because there's no more available space for a sign. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of like inside baseball here with the zoning regulations that are little nuanced things you can change. And that's if I'm talking to your planning consultant saying, check out, because you have some retail centers here. You should definitely check out what the town regs say on signage. It's a small thing, but it could be an important thing. So your regs are important, yes.
What's involved in putting together a template from a zoning perspective that makes it easier? What you were saying before, if people go on the website and they see, and we seem to have a reputation to be a little bit difficult from a zoning perspective. How do we go about facilitating that whole process for people? You know, outlining.
Making it better?
Making it better and easier. Yeah.
Well, well, that takes a little political work. What I tell new mayors all the time is, you have a list of all your commissioners? Let's take that list out and take a look at it. Change your commissioners is one thing.
Ouch.
Ouch, I know. And, you know, there's ones that are, but part of it is your regulations. A great example is variances. Okay, when somebody goes in for a variance, put an addition on or all that. If your regulations are too old, your ZBA, not your ZBA, whoever gives the variances in the town, are stuck with those regulations.
Zoning Board of Appeals, I think.
Zoning board, right. The ZBA has to enforce the zoning regulations, and so I had a project once with Skechers sign, Skechers shoe place in the Hamden Plaza. And if you know the Hamden Plaza, there's beautiful artwork in there. It's one of the only family-owned shopping centers left in our area. And the Skechers wanted to go in because the sign regulations were too old. They were only allowed to have this size sign without a variance. So they came in for a variance for this size sign. It was like 35 square feet. I never went to planning and zoning meetings or ZBA meetings because they didn't like it when I went. They thought I was being too pushy or aggressive or something. And I was texting the town planner in real time. The ZBA members said denied. And Skechers said, we ain't coming unless we get the sign we want. Because if you know the Hamden Plaza, it's really set back where Marshall's is. And there's a big berm with beautiful sculpture, and now there's Tesla charging machines.
I got them on.
Oh, that's the greatest invention, Skechers. I must have like 5 pairs. But the point is, you can't see the sign, you know, and they voted against it. And I texted the town planner. I said, motion to reconsider, motion to reconsider. And the woman made a good point, who was on the ZBA, who voted against it. She sort of a Debbie Downer, but she said, we have these regulations. If we don't enforce them, what good, why are we here? We can't vote for something just because we're being nice guys. The regulations put her in a box. And a lot of zoning regulations put ZBAs in a box. And the way the world works now is there's always lots of variances that are needed for businesses. Setback issues, side yard issues, again, tedious stuff, but if your regulations are overhauled, it will make your commission work go smoother. That's one thing I would say. I do think there are people that don't want change, and I can say that as the outside person coming, looking in, and I have advised mayors to change some of your members when their terms are up, because if the goal is to increase the grand list, to reduce that 46, you have to make some moves.
Yeah, how about some particular challenges for a town such as ours that has a joint, a combined planning and zoning? It maybe leads to a new business matter someday when we have more time, as we put it on
Yeah.
the new business agenda to talk about how we get there for bringing it all together. But can you speak to maybe some of the challenges of having a combined planning and zoning, where maybe you come from Hampton, where you have a planning and you have a zoning?
No, you don't. We have planning and
They're
zoning.
combined as well,
It's-
whereas New Haven doesn't, of course.
Right, well, a couple things. If you think of it in terms of the tools, the POCD is the plan and the zoning is the tool. Is the vision and the tool to implement the plan. The commission is a reflection of that. So, you're having a planning consultant come in, they're gonna make some recommendations. It takes the chair, the leadership of the chair to recognize that there's a flow there between the vision and the tool. And of course, it's, you know, what this commission may wanna be more outgoing about the way things work. But planning and zoning is planning and zoning in Hamden. I think it's the same in North Haven, in almost all the towns, but it's about leadership at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and public education of the citizens of what planning means, what zoning means. It's a little bit of everything, but it's very normal to have them together. It's leadership that changes it. That's not always easy with those matters. Then you got you have a conservation commission and inland wetlands commission.
Yes.
Okay, that's the other, you know, that's another one. I'll tell you stories all day long about what our inland wetland commission did to some manufacturers who wanted to expand. There's a whole story about poison sumac that I tell you for half an hour. Couldn't believe it. But anyway, you have to take a look at this, a fresh look at it, but your regulations will actually if you change your regulations, some people go to form-based zoning regulations. I know we've talked about it. I'm not a big fan of it because of the way Hamden was built, but it works in some towns, and it's not based on uses, it's based on form and design. And that's a whole other conversation you probably just need to have with the planning consultant. What are form-based zoning regulations? I think in some areas of Woodbridge it would actually work, because they're sort of virgin areas that you want to develop, and you can create, you know, planned development districts and things like that, where traditional zoning is called Euclidean zoning, which is all based on the use, on that piece, and the little R1 or, you know, B2 or whatever. So I think having some education also here of what that means, so your planning consultant should be able to easily handle that as part of the scope. Being educated, so you know, you are in a town where you know the people on all these commissions, I'm sure, you see them around town at events, at church, at synagogue, or whatever it is. The more you're educated, the more they're educated. Okay. All right, Scott, I'm trying to keep you within your schedule, I know. So all of these things, marketing yourself, I mean, we can pick this up another day, but there are lots of things. Educate the home customers about what you're doing. I always go to the civic associations. You don't have that kind of population. We have a lot of different civics, but you definitely have some folks that are, you know, in different places that you could educate about what you're doing. This is what we're doing. We're proactive. The last thing I'll mention, two last things I'll mention, then I'll shut up. Collaborating with 2030. You know, you have to start finding a way to do that. We were on I was on a call with a big group from New Haven, and Scott was on the call, and Jeremy was on the call.
Yes.
And I know Jeremy from real estate, and I said, "Hey, Jeremy," he didn't even respond. He said, "Who do?" That was it. So, you know, people are territorial. It's up to you, Mika, to bring it all together, but they definitely need to, and it sounds like it's starting. Definitely a joint meeting of some kind, whether it's in this format or a different format. It's got to happen, because you're going to be, you know, part of the drill is establishing the role of each group.
Mhm.
So you work together versus, what do they do? What do they do? The last thing I want to mention before I stop tonight is business creation. I realized that was a separate, module, if you will, in my original presentation. But if you're looking to attract businesses in town, it's sort of a combo of creating new businesses is something the newer generation is going to do. And because of COVID and the home business growth, you probably have a lot more than are legal and that you know about. But having some sort of strategy for business creation, that involves entrepreneur training, that involves also talking to your high school, talking to people who have kids that are in their 20s. My son has a little side business. He does much better in his side business than he does in his job. And I could tell the joy he gets from his side. Pokemon cards, selling really great, selling rare Pokemon cards and doing stuff like that. But having a strategy for business creation is part of business attraction, because you're obviously growing. Most jobs are created by new businesses.
Mhm.
That's a fact. So, that's another day, we can come back and talk about that.
Yeah.
So, I know I kind of went all everywhere, but there's a lot to think about on the attraction side. Some of the things are common to retention, but you definitely have to jump out of the box a little bit on things like housing.
Mhm.
Because these are things that are important to attracting companies or businesses or developers. Anyway.
Thank you.
This is great. Thank you, Dale. I mean, again, I'm sort of, the proactive versus the reactive piece. Like, what can we do now versus do we need to focus on getting our house in order before we can go pursue?
I think getting the
Right.
consultant on board is gonna definitely be a big help.
Right.
Somebody's gotta do the work.
Mm-hmm.
You all have jobs and, or, you got stuff you're doing, so, somebody passes away, you got something. You gotta go.
That's always gonna be there in business.
Right.
That's what I said to John. I said, what happens if, at a baseball game, I would say, what happens if somebody dies? He said, I'm leaving. Anyway, so, thanks for hearing all that.
Thank you, Dale.
Thank you, Dale.
So we are at 7:15, and Tony, right, the conservation's 7:30.
Conservation is right after us, yeah.
It's 7:30, right? Like-
Now they don't need to meet.
Yeah, there's some flexibility with that. I mean,
Okay.
if you were planning. that you
Okay.
could get it wrapped up.
What I'd like to do, Steve, if we could cover, like, maybe just real quickly.
2 minutes.
Steve emailed over last night. Remember, coming out of our last conversation, we had talked about, kind of a business community outreach, right? A lot of, what Dale's brought to the table tonight has got my mind spinning on a lot of things. And I think in terms of attracting new businesses, getting grounded in where are we, right? And what are the strengths and opportunities of Woodbridge today as is, provides a lot of insights in terms of what changes do we need to make to get our house in order, right? A lot of it could be right here in front of us. So Steve had actually emailed me last night with a conversation he had with one business that I thought would be a great jumping off point for us to do outreaches. We know business owners in the community and start to have those conversations, so.
I think probably the best way to approach this is with your consent, Tony's consent.
Steve, just for the purposes of the microphone there is probably a good
Yeah.
idea to put near you.
Just,
Thank you.
just thinking that it may be best that with your consent, Scott, and with Tony's consent, that I just submit this to Tony and have her distribute it to the group,
Sure.
so people can have a chance to look at it at their leisure. A couple of things that you're going to notice about the construct is that it's intended to provide confidentiality. Tell the story, but provide confidentiality, which is something that I think is integral to the success of this group. I've mentioned that last time that we were together too. And then I sort of broke it down into 3 different questions. In our business, we always want to know, are things getting better, they're getting worse, are they staying the same? Well, in this case, I broke it down into 3 different questions of what is Woodbridge doing well,
Yeah.
what challenges exist, and any initiatives that we can take to enhance the business climate in town. And a lot of the comments that came out of it, it was just a very clean conversation, but a lot of the comments that came out of it, I think you're gonna find are congruent with things that Dale has said. So with that, I just hand it back to you.
Was this a face-to-face, Steve, or was it?
It was scheduled by telephone,
Okay,
but
okay.
only for convenience. This is somebody who I know exceptionally well.
Yeah, okay. So we will distribute that, in the interest of
Okay.
of time this evening. The last, in terms of any new business that folks want to bring up to add tonight?
I wanted to ask if there's, if the EDC could help me in terms of, I'd like to do some outreach, and ties into what Steve has been doing. I'd like to do some outreach. I had hoped to start as soon as I came into office, and I'm finding that it's not always easy. I'm wondering if the EDC can identify every month 2 or 3 businesses that you feel, based on, whatever you might be doing at the time, that it would help if I was in contact with them, either with a member of EDC or without. But having that information from my perspective, it's easier for me to schedule and actually make it happen. And it's something that I'm very committed to in terms of trying, but I'm thinking that if I can do it in conjunction with some of your activity, it might help, it might be more productive.
Great.
So if you folks, we all go to different places, we all know different people from a business perspective. If you can come up with 2 or 3 names on a monthly basis and submit them to myself and Allison, we'll make a point to schedule some time with those business owners, be it on the phone or be it in person, depending on what they want
So
to do.
you would join us then, is that?
And then all I would ask is from you additionally, beyond the names, is just, okay, so where do you want to take the conversation? Is it asking things similar, just doing what Steve did, which is generally productive, all the time? Or is there something more specific along the lines what Dale was saying as far as industry clusters and things of that nature? Or is it somebody who should come in and talk to the group? That type of thing there, so.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be helpful.
Steve's format, it's like the old start, stop, continue, right? Is kind of how, any way to really kind of get a conversation like that going, and out of that, you probably would uncover like, hey, these are some of the real misses in town and areas where we can.
I just have one addition, if I could. I think it's important. What we're dealing with is just so vast. I feel as though it's very important that we formulate a plan. And I'm willing to do the legwork on an initial outline for the group to consider in terms of us identifying a plan, some very specific goals, short-term, long-term, and then ways that we can measure our performance against that.
Sounds good.
So I'd be willing to do that, I guess, with your consent, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's
Okay.
connect on that. All right,
Okay.
and I think we
Yes.
can. I've given some thought to that, so I can bounce that off of you.
Excellent.
Can I add to that? I'm sorry.
Please.
Can I add to that, Scott? So, like you said, there's a lot in front of us. Dale's been bringing a lot of information, and there's so many ways that we're going to go. I think the first thing, and maybe the best thing for us to understand, is where the town is today. How many businesses, the types of businesses, the map of the town in terms of the zoning, so we know where all these businesses fit and where some of the stuff that Dale's talking about could potentially fit. So without knowing where we are today, it's gonna be hard to figure out where we're gonna go.
It's a great point. And to that end, I don't think there would be any problem. I can ask Christine Sullivan to join us with a map so that we can all be more clear as to what our zoning really is and what the different codes mean and things of that nature. So it'll help me as much as you in terms of making sure I understand that correctly, and I think that's a great idea, actually. So let me
Okay.
know if you want to fit her in, and I'll
Yeah, I think
with that.
zoning. We'd also talked about having Marcia join us as well. Like, how is tax revenue generated, right? Like, it's an eye opener when you really start to look at it. And involving 2030 in our meetings as well as attending theirs. So.
And the last thing, I'm sorry, with the business outreach, the other element that I didn't mention that I think is very, very critical is how do we assess what vacant properties are available, particularly in our business district. how do we identify who the owners are? And I mean, I know, I've been working with the assessor on that, and I've approached a couple of the business owners just to see about speaking with them. I'm sorry, property owners specifically. And my priority is those that are vacant and available for growth. But I'm also interested in, for example, the ones who own existing properties and, commercial properties, to see what we need to do to help them, so, along those lines.
With vacancies, yeah.
Exactly right, exactly right.
So those things can be incorporated into this general outline?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the short term, right, versus when we talk about 2030, and that's why I kind of pointed out in the beginning, like, you're really looking at 2026, in 2 years, before we have the infrastructure, right? So, in the short run, I think where Meek is going, filling out some of the vacancies are where we could get some quick.
And I don't expect us to have a planner in place to do a lot of the legwork here. For example, the inventory is just, I think, essential. Always have felt that way.
Yeah, like you're both saying, Shadi, I spend, being retired now, I spend 3 hours a day on Woodbridge GIS. And then, of course, all my land records are on file, so gosh, you could probably say what a nerd I am. But I spend my time reading the deeds and all the properties and then going to Connecticut lookup to see who the LLCs are. And then you go to, you look at the Connecticut court cases and you find out, the court. What I'm saying is all that due diligence can, to the extent that you want to maintain everything as confidential, but information for the commission to have knowledge about being part of our community and building out our inventory. For instance, knowing that somebody has properties just as many in New Haven on our boundaries as in Woodbridge. And knowing that synergy that person could be bringing to the table is maybe important, because as Dale said, you gotta know the answer before you ask the question.
And also, by having.
You can't go in and say, geez, when, you mean you don't know that I own all the hotels in New Haven, or, you know what I mean, or on our border,
Or having the knowledge of what's going on, it helps you to prioritize where you put your attention,
Yeah.
because you can't be everywhere.
So I agree.
Yeah, no, and
I
it
just wanna-
just, I'm hoping when the planner does come in, you folks, this group is in a place to kind of take them along and dictate to more or less what we're going, or to at least input significantly into what this person, whoever, the consultant is gonna do. So I think if we can get started, it'll be a few months before we get the planner. If we can start to look at what, the inventory information and things of that nature, it puts us in a place where we can have them be more productive that much quicker. So, I know it's a lot of time, folks, and I appreciate it, because it's probably the only way it's gonna get done.
Yeah,
it's
it's important.
Dale, do we want to talk real quick before we wrap? Our next meeting on May 9th.
Oh, right.
So we're going to have Rex Development will come in. Ginny Kozlowski from Rex will come in to share the SEDS.
Right, so Ginny is the executive director of Rex, who I work for under this contract. And Barbara Malmberg, I think is how you pronounce it, they do a presentation on the comprehensive economic development strategy for the region, the New Haven region. And they are funded by the federal government because they manage this. And it's the federal EDA, Department of Commerce, the economic development plan, and it gets into clusters. What they'll do is presentation on Woodbridge, and where it fits in the region, how it compares economically, business-wise, statistically. They have to go to all the EDCs as part of their contract once a year. And since I will be on vacation in May, they probably be a good chance. And it's a very interesting presentation. I've heard it like 7 times in different towns, but but you'll like it. And they do a good job in making it interesting. And you'll find out some things, some things you may not know. So it's actually just good background information. And they are mandated by the federal government. They have to come to all the towns in the region. So I figured May would be a good time because I won't be here anyway, and so they'll be here, and we'll get in touch with you, get the exact spelling of the name.
Okay, that's great.
And do you have an idea of how long
They're about 20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay.
There might be questions after that, but they're pretty efficient. They know that commissions have other stuff going on.
Great. Okay. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Chatty,
Second.
second by Ray. All in favor?
Thanks,
All right.